Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Verbra Pfeiffer. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of South Africa, and the topic that I will be addressing today is language methodologies. What is good writing in a multilingual classroom? So having a look at my roadmap, of course, there's a point of departure and what motivated the study. Then I'll have a look at some literature review. Then I'll discuss my study, my findings, the implication for writing instructions, then the conclusion and my final thoughts. As a point of departure, I don't know many of you know that South Africa have 11 official languages. And I think very often the students feel that them not having English as a home language when they get to university might be a stumbling block for them to achieve their academic success. Now, in our South African universities, we have a wide range of English proficiencies. There's a small minority that are mother tongue speakers of English. And then some study English as a subject for 12 years, primarily mother tongue speakers of Afrikaans. Then some receive tuition from grade 4, and these are the mainly Black South African students that are taught at the public schools in rural and township schools. And then there's a number of second language speakers that graduate from English medium high schools, and they are reasonably well prepared to study English at university, when the university is English medium, and most of our universities today are English medium. And then, according to Klapwyk and van der Walt, students do realize the importance of being proficient in English language, and they also feel that it serves a means to an end, and this doesn't necessarily mean that they have to avoid or lose their home language. So according to Carstens, so even though there is this worldwide trend that's embracing multilingualism, it is important to consider whether to allow only the target language, English in the South African context, in the academic literacy classroom, or to create space for students to draw on the L1 or the strongest languages as a social, linguistic, and cognitive resource. So for multilingual students, the communication includes multilingual discursive practice where they move between languages, and this is not always a smooth process. So I will refer back to this later on when I start discussing my findings. So my motivation for embarking on this study was stirred by the extent to which translanguage occurs when students think in one language and they write in another. So for my literature framework, I looked at what Fulkerson associates with good writing. So there's a formalist perspective that is associated with correct and well-organized writing. Then there is the mimeticist perspective, that's factual correctness in content. Then there is the expressivist perspective where, sincerity, heartfeltness, honesty, originality of voice. And then there's the rhetorical perspective, which persuades, engages, or interests its audience. So writing in itself is a question of developing a set of mechanical orthographic skills, which involves learning a new set of cognitive and social relations. So according to Velasco and Garcia, translanguaging stresses the flexible and meaningful actions through which bilinguals select features in their linguistic repertoire. And that I will demonstrate also once I start discussing my findings, and you'll be able to see that the way they have selected their linguistic repertoire. And so according to Suresh Kanagaraja, translanguaging helps us adopt orientation specific to multilinguals and appreciate their competence in their own terms. And then what Pfeiffer and van der Walt states under translanguaging, where it refers to both the communicative action by individuals in a variety of situations, and a pedagogy where the lecturer creates the opportunity for translanguaging to occur. So with the layout of the study, this was a longitudinal study that I conducted at a university in Cape Town, the University of Stellenbosch, from 2016 until 2019. So in the first semester, I handed the students a questionnaire, and these were, I should also mention, these were PGCE students. So these were like pre-service teachers that I was working with. And they had to complete this questionnaire. And in the first first questionnaire that I handed to them in the first semester, they had to write down their understanding what good writing is, the importance thereof, and the challenges that they face when writing for academic texts. And then in and then in the second semester, after the students had returned back from the practice teaching, you know, because in South Africa, for PGCE students or B.Ed students, they've got to go out to the schools for 3 months, and then they come back again to the university to complete the year, and they will get a certificate or the diploma. And so these students then came back from the teaching practice, and then I handed them another questionnaire where I asked them whether their views on good teaching had changed and whether they saw some trends that they picked up in the writing of the learners while teaching. So that was quite interesting. So I used a 3-tiered analytical process that was created by Miles and Huberman. So what basically, I prepared the data sets and checked for completeness. I analyzed the information and I identified themes and categories. I synthesized the data by abstracting possible trends and linking the data to other research insights, And then I ensured trustworthiness where I identified themes in the data and I refined these themes. Now with the data analysis, in recognition of the subject nature of identifying themes and sub-themes, I supported the coding process by doing word frequency searches and relating words or phrases in context to the particular themes. For example, I would type in the word flow, and its code text showed that it appears in two senses, which describes writing from two perspectives. So these are also quotations from students. So the one student wrote, it engages the reader and flows effortlessly from the perspective of the reader, that I put in brackets. And then another student wrote, sentences must be coherent, must flow from one sentence to the next, and this I would regard as perspective from the writer. So in this way, I could identify overarching themes with particular sub-themes. Now, as I've mentioned, I basically would type in these words, so I would get all the data, I had all the data, and then I typed in these words, but I also noticed while reading through the data that some of them had mentioned similar words, and then I would circle those words, and therefore, you know, these are some of the words that were most prominent in their responses. So they would often use the word clear, you know, in relation to good writing, correct. So sentence must be written clearly, you must write correctly, or it must be written in a correct structure and must be easy to understand, etc. So these are the words that I have identified when you know, typing in these specific words. And so reporting on the convention, so the quotations of the students are in italics, and these are, I should mention, these are verbatim quotes in case you see that, oh my word, these words are spelled incorrectly. I never changed the wording because because these are students, keep in mind, these are students that already have a degree. And so this is now a postgraduate study that they have embarked on, that they are busy with. So the first theme that I identified when asked under the topic of what is good writing was the surface features. That includes the spelling, punctuation, and grammar. So I'm not going to go through all the quotations that the students wrote, or all the responses. I'm just going to nitpick one response from each, because I'm pressed for time, so I can't go through everything. So the student wrote, good writing should also be grammatically correct in order to be understood. Then the sub-theme was transparency of language, which should be clear and should make sense. The student wrote, good writing conveys the message of the writer clearly and succinctly. Then another sub-theme was correctness and accuracy of language use. Good writing makes use of punctuation, correct grammar, figures of speech, correct spelling, etc. The next theme I identified was good writing is the responsibility of the writer, which is coupled with words like effectively, clearly, should, must be able to, etc. So when the writer is able to write and convey the message or idea in a fluent and readable manner, then there was the sub-theme was the awareness of audience. As a writer, you must be able to convey meaning in a way that accommodates the target audience. Then also another student wrote, good writing also enables speakers with different dialects of a language to understand what is being said. The next theme was the awareness of genre. And I will discuss it a bit more later on, because this topic, or the mention of genre, does not only appear under what is good writing, but also when it came to the challenges that the students have in writing well. So the student wrote, good creative writing is distinct from good advertisement writing, for instance. Then the next sub-theme was make sense as a writer to help the reader. So the students that writing is good when you make sense in what you are writing. And then I'll just choose another one. The writing makes sense and is not difficult to read. The next theme was good writing flows. So the sub-theme was structure in sentence level and above sentence level. So flowing from one sentence to the next. It must be logical, have a beginning, middle, end, and then there's also coherence and cohesion. Good writing is writing that is coherent, meaning that it is unified. It has to flow so that reading is easy and natural. Then the next theme was literary elements and creativity as signs of good writing. So I'll just read the last two quotations. Good writing should demonstrate a level of creativity. It should be an eye-catching sentence or an artistic take on the piece of text. So part of that first question was what is good writing and the importance thereof. So I'm not going to hone in so much on the second part of that question, not for this paper, but I have discussed it already. And maybe if you want to find out more about it, you can send me an email. So then I asked them, do you use your home language when you are writing? And you can see that there were students that were very confident and said, yes, I do. And some of them also said the reason why they use their home language because they don't want to lose their home language. And that is why they do lean on their home language and use their home language when they are writing in English. And then there were students that were very confident and said they do not use their home language when they write in English because they would say things like, when I write in English, I think in English. However, the second part of this question, which we're going to look at after this, is how do you use your home language? Now, many of the students, or most of the students that said, no, I don't use my home language when I'm writing in English, they basically contradict themselves because the second part of that question was like, how do you use your home language when you're writing? And then they would say things like, well, I would write the sentence and then I would include the word in Afrikaans that I do not know, and then I would continue, and then I would come back to that word after I've either searched for it, or it comes back to mind what it is in English, or they would say, oh, well, I would think of the entire text in Afrikaans, and then I would write it in English. But this is the same person that said, no, I don't use my home language when I'm writing, but I'm not going to delve too much in that. And so these are some of the responses of the students when asked the second part of that question, how do you use your first language or how do you use your home language when you are writing? So the most common technique is that of translation, also called reword or convert from one language to another. So some of the responses from the students were, I read the sentence in English and try to reword it in Afrikaans, or figure out what it should be in Afrikaans in order to get a better understanding of it. I will then rewrite it in English. Okay, so it's quite a tiresome process. I first think what I want to say in Afrikaans, then translating it to English. So you can continue reading some of the other responses. And the students would do this in their home languages, whether it was isiXhosa, isiZulu, isiSotho, Tswane, and many of the other African languages. They would also go through this process of the translating the text and the wording. If they didn't know the word in English, they would put it in their home language and then go back to it and then replace it with the English word. So basically, very, very often the students would say they would use dictionaries, at word level, or they would structure and plan in Afrikaans, or whether it was Zulu or isiXhosa, and then write it in English, or they would summarize the entire text in Afrikaans, and then they would write it in English. And I've included this section, but I will fall back onto it later on. The use of home or other languages can also be related to time pressures. And when do you use the L1? And assume not always when I get stuck, then I use my L1. And even if they would claim that they do not use the L1 when they're writing in another language, whether it is English, sorry, when writing English, they do actually lean on their home language. At this juncture, I want to mention that I have collected data in Switzerland and Brazil, and I used the same or similar questionnaire on those students at university. And maybe that is why I'm also referring to the use of another language, especially in Switzerland, because not all of them were writing the academic texts in English at some of the universities that I collected data. But that is a topic for another paper. Then, when is writing in English challenging? And so many students wrote that it's in finding words. When I'm unsure about certain vocabulary, about certain topic, and that would be often the case, many students would say, and that's also where genre would come in, when they are not familiar with the genre that they have to write, or they're not familiar with the topic and they can't find the words in English. That's when they get stuck, and that stresses them also out a bit. And then academic and educational writing, surface elements, mechanics. When it comes to spelling, sometimes grammar, spell check is life, the student wrote. And then academic conventions, when I'm required to adhere to certain conventions that do not make sense to me or seem arbitrary, because they know that in English there's all these rules, and sometimes it does frustrate the students whose home language is not English. And then also tests. So the students said when they don't have any resources like dictionaries, they're not allowed to take the dictionaries or phones in with them to look up words. And then they feel this tremendous pressure with time when they know they have to complete this exam paper within a certain period of time, and they've got to come up with all these vibrant words, or, to get their point across in English. And so, or use the correct words in English. And so they do feel that that pressure when they are writing an exam, or they've got to finish a certain assignment within a certain period of time within a lecture theatre. Then also creative writing. Only when I write creatively is it a challenge to think of useful words for adequately describing a situation. And then the ones who wrote emotional writing, when I have to convey ideas linked to emotions, since I'm Afrikaans speaking, and this was a guy, because, it's like, oh, I don't like to talk about my emotions. And most of the times guys are leaning towards that tendency of not really speaking about their emotions. And then with the question of, after they came back from the practice teaching, did the perception of good writing change? And some of the students, they said, yes, it had changed. But then there were those that said, no, it didn't change. And then they would make a comment along the lines of, no, it hadn't, but now I realize that I've got to do X, Y, Z, or I need to lower my expectations of the learners, because, they were shocked at the, grade 11 home language speakers of English, and they couldn't write well and they couldn't spell well. And then once you wrote, it matters what level the student is as well. And what they did notice is that the problems that they have in extended writing, the students have too. For example, the surface features with spelling, punctuation, and grammar. And in the structure, limited vocabulary. They would ramble on when they were writing. They wouldn't get to the point, and they themselves would do the same, would make the same mistake. Or they would use plain and weak language, the limited imagination or creativity. So the implications for writing structures in the multilingual context. I think that as educators, lecturers, we need to strengthen the awareness that translanguaging strategies offer a distinct advantage that teachers should cultivate in their learners, so they can use them when they're planning, structuring, revising their writing. And I think it is very common that students, they do take on board the surface and mechanical features that teachers and lecturers often focus on. And maybe we need to enhance the features of writing above sentence level that so many of them indicated in their responses. And then when it comes to time-limited tests and assignments, which is a huge concern, especially when the students, they cannot find the words in English. Maybe it would be good if we allow dictionaries and other resources during testing and examinations. And I think that we need to be more tolerant of translanguaging in writing. For example, when students use words from other languages, especially in tests and examinations, And maybe also when there is not such a huge lexicon gap in the language that they are writing in, then why not tolerate it or accept it? As what I mean, the vocabulary, the English vocabulary is constantly growing, and I mean we have already accepted words, you know, from German. I mean, we're already using words like zeitgeist and Uber and Angst. It's already in the English vocabulary. So why not accept some of these words when students, that they could be in just broadening the dictionary and enlarging the dictionary and enlarging the vocabulary. So in conclusion, referring back to Fulkerson's terms, we noticed that students' view of writing it's still overwhelmingly formalist, with a focus on correct and well-organized writing. And this is especially troublesome, I think, for English teachers or pre-service teachers or teachers that's learning, or students learning to become English teachers, that they will continue in this formalist way of thinking, you know, and we need to maybe let them break away from that. And to a less extent, we see that Fulkerson's expressivist perspective with a focus on engaging and entertaining. Maybe we need to bring that more into writing. And I also think maybe we need to bring in topics that are of interest to the students, because most of the students or a lot of students wrote that they get stuck when they're writing on a topic that they don't know or they have no interest in. And I think maybe we need to start bringing in more topics that is of interest to the students. So as Suresh Kanagaraja says, that as we develop teaching strategies of translanguaging, maybe we should consider some serious issues of assessing effectiveness of this practice by allowing place for error and mistakes in translanguaging. And then I think by incorporating these translanguaging strategies, we are opening up the space that will allow for recursive process of writing to interplay between the languages a student have or has. So thank you for listening to my presentation. This concludes my presentation. On the picture I've included, on this slide, I've included a picture from Cape Town that I took at the Hout Bay Harbour, and I thought it would be interesting, since I just focused on South Africa for this paper, I would just include a picture from Cape Town. So if you have any questions, you are free to send me an email and I will respond, or else we will discuss it also after my talk. So enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so much for listening.